Okay. So, welcome everybody. This is session 5 of 8. I can't believe this.
You've got it, but you just watch your hand because you're going a bit muffly.
That should be better. Welcome everybody. This is session 5 of 8. I can't quite believe that we're this far in, but I thought that as we are just more than halfway through, we might take the time in the check-in to do a little bit of a mini retrospective. So the invitation for check-in today is what's been brilliant over the last 4 weeks. What, if anything, would you change, and what would you like to bring, or what would you like? What would you like the next 4 weeks to bring for you? So I can start. I think for me, although I've practiced other types of virtual experiences with Kate, this is the one where the content is fresh for me. So I've been really delighted with how, and I guess I don't have a comparison, but how well this is translated to this format. And I think that, being able to serve those of you, especially that are in the more regional communities, in the same way that we can do in person, is a lovely challenge, but also seems to be working, at least for me. I think one of the things that I'd change, and it will be different for me for the last 4 weeks, is just not traveling as much, because it is 5:33 a.m. and sometimes it's a struggle when I'm not in one place. But those are all challenges that being remote also allows us to compensate for. And over the next 4 weeks, just really learning from all of you, because that's where my learning comes in for sure. But equally, there's stuff that I can apply to the teams that I'm working in. So I guess maybe my commitment over the next 4 weeks is to maybe participate more especially with the homework in between times. And that would feel really good. I will call on, how about you, Kate? Why don't you go next?
Kate, did you say?
I sure did.
Okay. I hadn't thought about this until you just said the question, but the thing that I'm happy about is it hasn't been as scary as I thought it was going to be. So I definitely had some reservations about this kind of style of program, and I think now I'm totally sold. So I can't see any reason why we'd run workshops anymore, and we should just do things on Skype. So I think I'm really sold on that. And I really like the shortness of it, but then probably the thing that I would change, and it really was obvious on the last session, I think, is this kind of balance of feeling responsible to share content with people getting the chance to contribute. So certainly the last one, I just felt like I just talked. What do you think about that? Oh, that's nice. Talk. So the thing I would change is either extending it a little bit longer, so beyond 8 weeks, so to 10 weeks or something, so that we have enough space for people to really contribute. That would be my change, I think. But I've loved it. In terms of an introduction to working on Zoom, I've really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant.
And what are your hopes for the last 4 weeks?
That there is space for people to share their work, what they're seeing, and I get the chance to learn from that.
Cool. Will you tag the next person, please?
Carla.
Hi, everyone. So for me, I've actually really enjoyed all the resources and being able to have somewhere that I can go to and pull more information and to look back over the training that we've done, because at the moment I feel like my mind's a bit of a sieve and everything, just as soon as it goes in, it goes straight back out. So just being able to have that has been really great for me. What I'd probably change for me personally in this point in time would, if another one had come up at a later date, I suppose for the last couple of weeks things have been really crazy for myself. But not only that, I've had just a complete change in my whole team again. So I started off with one team, and then halfway through we had a few changes, and then now I've just got a whole new team again. And I've got staff coming back from maternity leave, so that's a bit of a struggle trying to work that out. But for the next 4 weeks, my hopes would be just to continue learning and getting more resources, but I know I'd be working a lot more harder with my newish team and going through them with them. Yeah.
Will you tag the next person, please, Carla?
Nathan.
So what's been good, I've really enjoyed listening to everybody sharing their different stories and just different stuff, where they're going through the different issues that they've had, to try and compare it to what I've been going through and see if there's any similar resolutions that we can use at the same time. What I'd like to do different was probably get the team, I really need to focus on this, together more often, as they are quite difficult to get together at once. There's a big team that, yeah, we have the biggest issue is getting everyone together in one spot. We have to do meetings over, like, split up, or sometimes people just don't show up at all if they have other commitments. Over the next 4 weeks is that, yeah, I'd like to be able to get them together with a meeting with everybody next Tuesday, which I was hoping to start more of the team building stuff, but there is a new plan which is quite a bit bigger than what we had before. So we're going to have a look at maybe revamping the team up around there as well, and how we're doing things and operating there. So that's my plan over the next 4 weeks with them. And I'll go with Chris.
Hey everyone, I have found the program so far to be really brilliant actually, and it's just really walked alongside shaping some teams. I found it really useful to have the resources, especially in building the early stages of teams. I feel like I've known about those resources, but never really had a good structure and way to put that forward. So it helps me to get there. What I would change is I get withdrawals with the 2 weeks. I'd rather it be 1 week every week. I miss you guys so much. Because the learning is so great as well. Like I want it to be fresh in my head and then go on quiet. I really enjoy that. And over the next 4 weeks, I'd probably like to engage a bit more. So last night I was re-watching last week's video, and you hear different stuff. So I'm going to try and make sure that I re-watch the recording each week. And we'll go with Kat.
Sorry, problem with my mouth. Hi everyone. Yeah, I guess for me, what I've gotten the most out of it is a lot of self-awareness and realisation that my team has got problems and they're not my problems. I really carried that as a self-reflection that, you know, it's my problem and I need to fix it. But this workshop has really shown me that there are tools, it built my leadership and resources to be able to help me help my team be accountable for their own issues and problems and resolving things themselves. So yeah, it's been really good. What I would change, I'd probably like it to go for a longer period of time. Like it feels like it's nearly over. I'd like it to go for, I don't want it to stop pretty much. It's been great. And yeah, the next 4 weeks, really looking forward to continuing the journey. Yeah. And Shanti.
Well, what's been brilliant for me is obviously meeting all of you. I think I have suffered a little bit from the isolation, as I said previously, and not being able to get out and, you know, go for training as much as I would like to, because it's time away from the office. And I'm getting better at that. But, you know, the idea of Skype too, you know, used to scare me quite a lot. But, you know, this is just wonderful that I've become quite tech savvy. And what I would change, probably, you know, have a little bit more, like Christine said, meet you guys weekly perhaps, because the 2 weeks is a bit of a lapse, you know, to try and keep the pace going. So that's the only thing that I would change. The other thing, what was the other thing that we were talking about?
What are your hopes for the rest of the program?
Yes, for the rest of the program, the resources have been wonderful. So I'm looking forward to accessing more. Obviously, there's plenty of stuff out there, but just the fact that you guys have been able to put the stuff that are relevant to our learning. I've been able to do a lot of self-reflection with a lot of the stuff that has been put on the resource side. So thank you very much for that. So I'm really looking forward to the next 4 weeks and yes, learning.
Okay.
Yeah, over to
Go
you,
on, Susan. Oh, okay, so as usual, right, I've got me plan with me times against it, and I'm going to try really hard to stick to it, right? So what I've got down for today was that we've got the chance to just reflect on the last actions. So that was around purpose and direction. And then today we're going to start looking at conflict. And I think conflict will probably run throughout the rest of this program. So I think we're kind of introducing it here, but I think it's the kind of really pivotal one for me in the whole of working with teams, really. So we're going to introduce it here. So that's the plan. So I've organised the session so that we get a bit of time to do a bit of reflection, and then we get into conflict. And there's definitely, I'm so excited for you because there is this absolutely stunningly brilliant video that I can't wait for you to watch, which relates to conflict. So yeah, there's definitely some actions at the end of today that I think you'll enjoy. So in terms of what we agreed from the last session, so would it help you to see it on the screen, or do you just know it? You want to see it on the screen? Okay. So I'll put it up. So what we've got down from the last session was, like I say, we talked about purpose. And what we agreed individually was that we'd look at our golden circle and get it clear for ourselves. Oops. So that was our own why. And we talked about that because Simon Sinek has taught us a bit about, it's not just what you do, it's why you do what you do, and how we can, articulate that for ourselves. I think gives us a greater chance to help a team articulate their why or their purpose. And I think it's a really simple way of doing it. We also agreed that you would complete your emotional intelligence booklet. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Are you seeing a PowerPoint? Yes? Okay. All right. I can't see you, you see, on my screen. And we also agreed that you would have a go at completing your emotional intelligence booklet. Because I can't see you, I'm going to have to keep moving backwards and forwards. Did people manage to do that? Right, it's a bit of a mix. Some people did, some people didn't. Okay, I'm going to move that way. I wonder if that would work. Right. Okay, and then if you were running a session with teams, we talked about, so it's almost like there's a kind of bit of a lag. So the last session before this was about trust. So we talked about in your team session, looking at trust, supporting people to develop their profile, whether you use Belbin or the other tools, and some gentle disclosure. And potentially, if you've done yours, facilitating the team to start to think about their purpose and their why in terms of the golden circle. Sorry, I don't know why it's doing this. Right, so I'm coming back to you guys. So, given that they were our actions, who managed to have a go at their why? Okay, Carla, you did. Chris, you did. Okay, so should we just have a quick check-in about that then? And you can share with us whether that was helpful, unhelpful, whether you recommend to the rest of the team that they should do it, not do it. Yeah, is that all right? So Carla, give us your perspective.
I actually really enjoyed thinking about why I do what I do, because I think I've just gotten into such the habit of just doing and not actually realizing or understanding why I'm still doing this particular role. So I think for me, it was actually a really good reflection of where I'm at within my role and where I'm at just in general. But then it's interesting because I was talking to some of the team that I work alongside around what I'm doing, and they're like, having the conversation with them around why they do what they do and why they're still in this role and stuff like that. It came out to be that we were all quite similar, and we were having a joke and wondering if it was more around the fact of, is it just because it's what our organisation's drummed into us?
So almost potentially a bit of groupthink.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And because we've started calling it like the inclusion cult. So, but I really enjoyed it, and I think like if I didn't do it, I'd probably still be in that doing phase instead of going, actually, no, I still do like my job. This is why I actually do it. And this is why I'm here. So I recommend doing it.
Okay, thanks, Carla. What about you then, Chris, if you had a go?
I had a go and found it really, really hard. I hated every minute of having a go at the Y, to be honest. I couldn't articulate it well because I feel like it was really multifaceted and I couldn't choose the right words to get out what I wanted. Everything that I wrote down, it was like bits of it, but it didn't translate very well. That's my experience.
Okay, well, I think that's helpful reflection, because if it's a tool to help a team articulate their purpose, so why is this team in existence? And do you remember the last time that we talked about it isn't enough? And I think, Carla, your experience about, is this just a bit of groupthink? And it reminds me a bit of, I used to be a self-advocacy worker, so I used to support people with an intellectual disability to come together and think about who they are and stand up for themselves and all that stuff. And it reminds me of one of the kind of sad things about that is I think we were all such like advocacy warriors, right? We used to talk about rights, choices, and we'd kind of be full on with people about their rights, and people would say back to us, so I don't know, we'd say, what do you think about X? Let's just go rights, choices, just almost like, just a load of words that we'd kind of drummed into people. And I think that's what Simon Sinek is getting at, that actually we need to get to a place where people can really say themselves, why am I here? And then pull that together for the team. And I think it is tough. And I think you can also see, and you'll probably know members of teams who are in it, who kind of say the stuff, we're here to deliver good supports to people and families, or we're here to, but you can completely tell there's nothing personal in that. There's no real personal connection. And I think that's what he's getting at with the Golden Circle, that it's got to be enough to pull you in as well as pull others in. And he certainly talks about it in a kind of retail space, in terms of, he uses the example of Apple. People are drawn to why they do what they do, not necessarily what they do. But I think that's as important in our sector, that people are drawn to our organisations, why we do what we do, but we've got to find our own connection to that. So yeah, it's one tool. I definitely would suggest giving it a go, because I think that's just so helpful to hear Carla's perspective and Chris's, that they're really different. And I think if you have a go at yours, I think then it gives you a real experience when you're working with teams around either this is tough, or actually this really was helpful for me to kind of reset or re-energize. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Did everybody manage to fill in their emotional intelligence booklet? No, a couple of people no. Okay, so got a couple of people yes. Okay, that's helpful for me in terms of, as we go into the session, who has and who hasn't, and some reflection. What about, did people manage to watch the Simon Sinek YouTube clip? So Chris, you said you did. Carla, you did. Kat, you did. Okay, well, I'm going to shut up then. So just some reflections on where did that take you thinking? Because we talked about it, but we didn't watch the film, and he's got a different take. Okay, so where did that take your thinking, the people who did watch it? Carla?
I didn't watch the one that you'd posted into Slack. I watched the longer one, so it was like 18, 20 minutes or something like that. And I found it really interesting. Like, I like the fact, like, obviously I'm a bit of an Apple freak. So he used Apple, so that drew me in straight away to having, like, just to be able to listen to him. But I think for me, the thing that really, really stood out was around constantly going around, people don't buy what you do, but why you do it. And I think when I think about the work that we do, and like how we advertise or how we go out and meet new people and stuff like that, I'm the person that does that. So I'll go out and meet new families, and I think the way that I've been doing it is kind of along those lines. But yeah, like, I really enjoyed it, and I thought that I wanted to watch more of his TED Talks. So, yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, pretty much the same as Carla there. I just looked it up on YouTube, so I got the 20-minute version as well. It was really, really helpful actually just to explain a bit more in depth the golden circle, and I did some reflecting as well around when we go out and we meet new customers, especially here at Avivo, how I pitch or sell the why and why we do what we do. And then that's where I found it really quite interesting with writing my own why, because I think I can give a number of different versions depending on who I'm speaking to. So.
Kat, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I found it really interesting to think about thinking from the inside out, thinking about the why first, and going through the motions to get to the outside.
Cool. Susan, did you manage to see it? You must have come across Simon Sinek before, have you?
Yeah, I've watched it before, but I haven't watched it. I didn't watch it in between as homework. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So in terms of, and I'll post this into Slack, Simon has a book called Why Leaders Eat Last. So I don't know if people have come across that. That's a really interesting book. It definitely has the kind of take on servant leadership. So, you know, we talked about that at the beginning. He definitely, kind of articulates that and gives you some practical examples. So if you're looking for further stuff around him, then that's interesting. I've had some interesting feedback about him though. I think when that YouTube clip went crazy, I think his message went crazy. I think he might have got a bit full of himself, but I don't know him personally, so I don't know. And if you ever come across him, don't tell him I said that. But I have heard some interesting stuff about it. But anyway, I'd recommend the book. So, okay. So if we move on then, in terms of conflict, I'll share my screen again, because this keeps me right, and I hope I'll get to see yous now. Oh, it's still doing it. Why is it doing that? Now, yes, I do see it. So I get to see yous as well as see the screen. No, I don't. Any idea why that's happening, Susan?
Maybe if you go to the top where it says View Options, if you maybe exit full screen, you'll be able to see us, or side-by-side mode or something.
Does that work for people? Can you still see that?
Yeah, we can see it, but it's not. Yeah, if you go to, what about?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'll go back to sharing screen, but you just need to know I can't see your facial expressions. So if you've had enough, or you are not sure, you need to say something, because I won't be able to read any of your body language. Is that okay? I can see you now as well. I can see you on the screen. Okay, so we're going to focus on conflict, right? Which is, it's a real shame that Emma's not here, because I remember at the beginning of the course, Emma brought up that was part of the area that she found really difficult. And I can honestly say it was the area that I found most difficult and most scary working with teams. So certainly in the early days, it was the thing that I used to be the most frightened of. And my mentor, a woman called Judith North, I can remember the first team I worked with, and it was a team of executive members, and none of them got on with each other, and they all fell out in the middle of this session, and two of them started to cry. And I remember vividly being in London, so I was in a London borough, ringing Judith and saying, oh my God, they're crying. What am I going to do? And she was saying, well, that's good news, isn't it? And I remember just standing thinking, this is unhelpful. This is not a teaching moment or a learning moment. Like, what the hell am I actually going to do? And now it's really interesting. Like, that must be, 10, 12 years ago? Now, if people don't get on or start to cry, and don't take this the wrong way, I am a bit like, oh, well, this is interesting. We might be getting somewhere. So I'm not advocating that your aim is to get people to cry, but I can so totally see a difference in my comfort with conflict now. I was really scared of it, and I think I've learned some ways to kind of handle that. And Kat, I could really resonate when you were saying, actually, these are not my issues to solve. these are yours and yours and yours. And my job is to help you see some of that and potentially help you with some strategies, but it's not mine to hold on to. So conflict, I think, is absolutely critical to teams. And I suppose one of the things that Lencioni talks about is imagine a team that doesn't disagree, that doesn't challenge each other, and they all think the same, which we have talked about groupthink, haven't we? Yeah, so groupthink is just where you get a group to become almost fearful to give an opinion, that they all just say the same stuff, So imagine a team where that stuff, it doesn't happen. I think, and the evidence would suggest, it'll be a team that's not that successful, and certainly not that innovative, because we need people to share how they see it. We need people to give a different perspective. But to do that, you need to have a level of comfort with conflict. And that's not easy for everybody. It's almost like we've been taught from childhood, disagreeing is not a good thing to do, or it's not a polite thing to do. Definitely at the heart of it all for me is this kind of robust conversations. And I have definitely learned, and you'll have heard me do it either on this course or other times. I'll say things like, can you help me understand blah, blah, blah. So you might say something and I'll say, can you help me understand? That is a strategy I've learned. Instead of saying, I totally disagree with you, I see it this way. Can you help me? It's kind of a willingness to hear your perspective, but it's a willingness to bring conflict into the room that feels the least confrontational, if that makes sense. So can you help me understand how you see it like that? Can you, and I think that's at the heart of these kind of robust conversations. And the bit that I want to spend time on today is that at the heart of all of it, I think self-regulation. And I'm learning that I call it self-regulation based on Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence work. I'm learning that other people, you can hear the term self-management. So people, when I was in the States, Susan and I were in the States working with an organization called Decurion, and all of their staff go through a kind of mandatory module on what they call self-management, which is self-regulation in my terms. And they reckon, it's so critical to the culture of the organisation that it's one of those things that's not up for debate. Every staff member needs to do it, and every staff member needs to be willing to look at themselves and explore their ability to regulate. So that's why we're doing it. It's not just because it's a good laugh. It is at the heart of the team's success and performance. Here's just a quote that I suppose I hope I've kind of summed that up. That Lencioni talks about, essentially, if you don't get people's opinions, then they're not really on board. And we've certainly seen, and we'll talk about it at the commitment stage, but you can certainly see where people say they're in, or they kind of, the group think in, are we all doing that? Yeah. But actually, when you go outside and have a cigarette, they tell you something completely different, and they're kind of like, who's she kidding? All of that kind of stuff. And that's what he's getting at. If we can't find a way, or if we can't create a space where people can give their opinions, they're not really, you can't assume that they're on board. I suppose that's what he's saying. Now, the reason I asked you to do your emotional intelligence survey or questionnaire was because I knew that we were going to be talking about it in this session. And the area I want to focus most on is self-regulation, and I'm going to come back to it. But I know that you've all done your questionnaire, and we're going to have time to look at that. But emotional intelligence, it was developed, the concept was developed by a guy called Daniel Goleman. And it is it's a different form of intelligence as opposed to IQ. So IQ, which our kind of education system's based on, is based on people's ability to take in information, retain it, and be able to recite it. That's IQ. So if you think about when we all sat our exams, you retained information, you learned information, you retained it, and then you were able to kind of say it back to people through various, assignments or assessments. So IQ, emotional intelligence, they reckon is twice more important than IQ. The research would tell us that some of the best leaders in the world have a really high emotional intelligence profile, are incredibly emotionally literate, so they can read emotions in themselves and in others. And if you are working with people who have a high level of emotional intelligence, it has quite a big impact on your performance, because people can kind of read you and help you develop that. And the good news is you can definitely learn it, and it increases with age. That's what the research tells us, right? What I would add on to here, I don't know if it comes next, but yeah, what I would add on is I think some of the self-regulation learning and development can be a bit painful at times, but we'll get into what you think about that in terms of your assessment. So, and like I say, I'm not going to, this is not all about emotional intelligence, but I want to put it in context. So Daniel Goleman coined kind of 5 areas of emotional intelligence, and these are them. The first 2 are about how you understand yourself. So what's going on for you? What are you noticing that's going on for you in terms of your emotions? And then the other 3 are what goes externally. So your ability to motivate yourself and put that out there, your ability to read what's going on around you, and your ability to connect with other people. So that's what he's talking about. And I think Grace might have mentioned this in one of the sessions. These are often called, in a kind of professional world, soft skills. Has anybody heard that terminology before? It's the kind of usually it's kind of managery. I was going to say something really rude there, but kind of managery terminology, like, oh, we'll see what their soft skills are like. And I think that's really underestimating how powerful these are. I don't think they're soft at all. I think they're really critical. I would argue people who are emotionally literate, I think, are more effective in businesses than people who have got like more qualifications or more IQ. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of them, really. So I'm just going to run through them. So self-awareness is what you would expect it to be. I think it's something that we're probably most familiar with because of all the kind of self-help and self-development movement. So what do we mean by that? Remember, it's internal. So it's somebody who can recognize their own moods, emotions, and drives that's going on inside of them. It's somebody who understands and is willing to explore their strengths and their weaknesses and, what they stand for, what they're driven by. And people who can understand themselves and their effect on other people. And I won't go through all these, but the kind of things that you would see in somebody who would consider themselves, it'd be interesting to think about your emotional intelligence assessment that you did yourself. If you are somebody who scored high in this area, self-awareness, these are some of the things we might see in you. So they tend to be people who are quite self-confident, tend to be people who can take the mickey out of themselves. They can laugh at themselves and aren't worried about that. They tend to be congruent. So that is people who what they say and what they do matches because they have a high level of awareness. So they know if I say this and do something else, they know that will have an impact. And sometimes they can be seen as a bit naive or not tough enough because they're kind of very willing to share their own vulnerabilities, I think. Just to get a sense, who scored highly on self-awareness? Don't be shy. Okay, Carla, you've just put your hand up. Well done, you. Right, okay. So just getting a sense of it, right?
Sorry, Kate, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. What are your classes high?
Well, what was the scores? 0 to 5?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it depends on how because we had a couple of conversations about how you add them up. But I suppose it comes down to, is it higher than the others? Is it up there in the top?
So for mine, for both of them, I marked myself at 33, and then the person that did it for me marked myself at 32. And they were all, like, we'd answered all of the questions.
Right, that's cool. And that's pretty consistent, so that's reassuring. Okay, so I would say that's high. So I think if that's higher in your against all your other scores, then that's high. Okay, cool. So I'll keep going. So the one that I'm really interested that we spend our time on this session looking at is self-regulation. So this kind of, and the image is one that just reminds me of what it looks like, that he is actually saying, I'm fine. And you can see that he's anything but fine, in terms of you reading what's going on for him. So self-regulation, which is the area that I think has the biggest damage to, or does the biggest damage to teams if it's not properly supported. What does it mean? There we go. So again, it's internal. So it's somebody that can recognize what's going on for them. So their own moods, their feelings, and they're able to have enough control to use that in a way that's helpful, right? So, and that's where the regulation comes in. So we can all be emotional beings, but it's your ability to regulate your emotions that's the powerful bit, right? And just think of those people that you know who say things like, you know, I'm just really passionate. What I'd say, and it depends on how I've seen the impact of that in teams, is somebody who's really passionate. There is another word for it, which could be unregulated. Does that make sense? I've got these feelings, so I just let them out. Well, there is an element of being able to regulate your feelings and your emotions and understanding the impact of that. If you were somebody who scored highly in regulation, then these are some of the things you'd see. So they tend to be people who people trust. So actually, I'll just kind of pause there for a minute. If you think about somebody who is not well regulated, what can often happen is people don't trust them because they don't know what version of them they're going to get. So you don't know if they're going to be kind of composed and regulated or unregulated, right? And I'll just, so irrespective of the screen, I'll just share with you a bit more about regulation, right? So if you see regulation as like a spectrum, right? So at one end, we've got under-regulators, and at the other end, you've got over-regulators. And somewhere in the middle, you've got good regulation, you know, like, if we call it that, good regulation, sound regulation, right? So under-regulators, these are the people that I see have the biggest impact in team dysfunction. So under-regulators are people who don't always recognize what's going on for them. So that picture, they'll say, you can see visibly they're not okay. And they'll say things like, I'm fine. And everything about them is saying they're not fine, right? And I use the terminology under-regulators, leakers. And I would introduce this terminology into your teams. So a leaker is somebody who's under-regulating. They're not able to control it. They're leaking all over the place. So either their body is leaking. So your partners are probably the best people to tell when you're leaking, right? And it's got nothing to do with incontinence. It's to do with the leakage of your emotions through your body, you know, sometimes through your words. They'd be able to see when you're leaking. So I reckon your partners, if we text them now, tell us what Kat looks like when she's under-regulating or she's leaking. So when she says she's fine, but you know she's not really, what do you see? Kat, what do you think they would say?
I get huffy and puffy.
Right. So we'd hear a lot of kind of,
yeah.
Okay.
Stamp my feet a bit.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to share what their partner, you think, or their loved one would say about them when they're unregulated or they're leaking? Nathan?
I'll probably get a bit short. Don't just like, yep, whatever, okay. So, yeah.
So that's really helpful, right, Nathan? Because even just watching you, reading your body language, I don't know if anybody noticed, I heard the words that came out, but actually something happened to your face and your head. So you turned your head to the side, you looked it up. It was kind of like, yeah. That, I mean, this is very exaggerated. I'm not trying to be you. But that kind of, so
don't do that.
So even if you weren't speaking, we would be able to see you leaking through you doing that kind of motion. Yeah? Yeah.
I do get that feedback as well. Aaron's mentioned it in a couple of team meetings, like you didn't agree with it, did you?
So that's it. That is exactly it. If you can spot and find a way in a team to say to each other, Nathan, I can see you're leaking, or Nathan, you're leaking. Have you got something to say? You know, Kat, you're leaking, or particularly when people are saying, I'm fine. The best examples in a team, so I would talk about examples like somebody who walks into the office or walks into a team meeting and they haven't said a word, but everybody can tell they're not in a very good mood. You know, the way they make a cup of tea is just loud. You know, I know that's what I do. If I'm making a cup of tea and I'm not that happy, it's just loudly done. You know, the cup's kind of, yeah. I would talk about people who, so what I've noticed reading people's nonverbals are things like, and you have to be careful reading nonverbals, right? Unless you're an expert at it, but things like, Yeah, I'm fine. Totally fine. All of that stuff, right? So I see that loads in teams, kind of slouching about, you know, that's what I'm trying to read. Is this, are you, is what you're saying matching your body, and is that leaking something else, right? Now, so there's underregulation, which I honestly think is the biggest destructive force to teams. And I don't think we've got very good ways of A, being able to talk about it, and B, being able to support people with it. So if you think about all of our HR tools that are around people's ability to work in a team, they're often focused on task and performance. So things like, are you, is the person, well, we call it performance management. But often what I see in dysfunctional teams is it's not about performance. They can do a task. They can achieve the task. You know, they can do the job that's put in front of them. It is their ability to regulate that is the problem, and the impact that has on the rest of their colleagues. At the other end of the scale, right, so you've got under-regulation here. At the other end of the scale is over-regulation. And that is somebody who shows no emotion. So they're so regulated, nothing's getting out, right? So I used to manage somebody who is definitely, for me, the best example I can think of, who was over-regulated. So when things got tough, we would be sitting in a meeting and she would give you nothing. So you'd be saying to her, what do you think? And she'd be like, yeah, good. And nothing, right? And honestly, I'd be like, really? What do you really think? You know, like really trying hard to try and read something in it, but she'd just go kind of, deadpan really. The research says men are more likely to overregulate and women are more likely to underregulate. Now, the research says that, but I do wonder whether that's just sexist, because there is a kind of long history of women being seen as kind of emotionally neurotic. So I don't know, but Daniel Goleman would argue the research says that women are more likely to underregulate, men are more likely to overregulate. So just before I move on, do you see any of that leakage or underregulation in some of the teams that you're connected to? Carla?
We've, in the team that I'm currently working with, we have quite a few staff that leak. And I suppose sometimes it depends on the day in some aspects. So like one day a particular staff member could be under-regulating and everything's happening for her, but then the next day she's just like gone stone cold. And it's like she's flipped from one aspect to another aspect where she's over-regulated, and it's just like, what the hell's happening? And it's quite disruptive for both of them. Are really disruptive for the rest of the team, because we know what's happening, or we know there's something wrong, but she's just sitting there going, nah, it's okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and it's really hard to work with, isn't it? It's really hard for a team to be able to respond to that, because there's only so many times you can say, are you okay? And then what can happen is it almost is like we support the leaking. So teams end up kind of, okay, are you all right, Julie? Do you want me to make you a cup of tea? Or nobody's really addressing what's going on. So that's really helpful. Anybody else got any thoughts about leaking or what you've seen in teams, Chris?
I saw a bit of this in a couple of the team meetings that I did throughout the week when we're trying to do some of the more tougher stuff, and talk through asking people to be a bit more vulnerable. And I did the Belbin with the team last week, and it went so horribly. Well, it wasn't horribly wrong, but it wasn't as smooth as I was hoping it was going to be. And at the end, I just checked in with a couple of people whilst others were still talking about their Belbin. And the body language from this one lady who was going, I'm fine, was every part of me knew she wasn't. And then I went up the other side of the room to a bloke and I said, how'd you go with that? And he bit my head off and said, why would you be asking me if I was all right with this? So there's lots of, over and under.
So are you all right with that? Well, why would you be asking me? Like,
Yeah.
if that's not leaking, I don't know what is. Right.
Yeah, and another lady in the team asked him, do you need help filling out your Belgian? And he basically bit her head off as well and went, why would you think I need help with that?
Okay, right. So you're definitely with me in terms of the impact of leaking or under regulation and what we do about it, right? And probably the first thing I'd say is the team need a common language to know what it is. So not many of us, and I learned about regulation through leadership work, I think it was, when I first discovered it. But before that, I hadn't learned about it as a support worker. Nobody'd even talked about it, which when you think about the work that we do, aside from team development, actually me as a support worker, my ability to regulate myself is crucial. When you think I could be going into people's homes, leaking all over them, my moods could be having such a big impact on the people that we support. It's incredible, I think, that we don't talk about it. So the first thing I'd be saying is you need to talk about it. So you need to talk about it as it is a science. So in terms of emotional regulation, it is a thing. I can give you references for it. I'll give you the PowerPoint to be able to talk through it. So just going back to that screen that I was showing you before. How do you know what does good regulation look like? It looks like this. So the first critical thing for me is team, you need to talk about it and you need to introduce it to the team. In the same way you talked about trust, it's really important we trust each other. Well, one of the things we need to talk about is regulation. So having a language, having a way of talking about under regulation that is as least violent as possible, which is where the leakage comes from. So if you can talk about, Susan, I can see you leaking there. It isn't a kind of direct personal insult on Susan. It looks like you're being a bit of a pain in the arse. That probably won't go down very well, but being able to say, I can see that you're leaking. I would introduce it in a funny way. So one of the examples that I did with you is, what would your partners say they see? So get people to talk about that, get people to talk to each other about it. And it kind of, you're not really very happy. What would your partner say they see? And that helps the team start to get familiar with, even though some of them will know what it looks like because they've spent years putting up with it. What does it look like? The thing I didn't mention before is, which always comes as a surprise to me, is often under regulators don't know that they're leaking, right? Now that's not the case for everybody, but it is definitely worth you knowing this, right? That people kind of spend a lifetime not being called on their lack of regulation. So people can have spent a lifetime, have family members who've backed this up, have watched it in other people. It is perfectly okay to come to a meeting and not speak to anybody. It's perfectly okay to say things like, I'm fine, and make a cup of tea loudly and all that stuff. So, and when you ask them about it, so once you've introduced it, so this is probably two things, I just need to be dead careful here. I wouldn't call somebody on their leaking until we've had enough conversation in a team that everybody knows what leaking means, and people have been able to say to the rest of the team, this is what it looks like in me, right? But I have definitely, and I do think it's kind of critical in team development, and this is the kind of scarier bit, I have definitely called people on it. So I have said to people, Chris, you're saying to me you're okay. Everything about your body language is telling me something else. It looks like your body might be leaking something else other than what's coming out of your mouth. So I would definitely call people on it, because what you want to get to is a point where team members can call each other on it. And that's why you kind of introduce it in a bit of a light-hearted way at the beginning. I can see you leaking, Susan. I can see you leaking. So I've called people on it. And then the other thing that I've done, and this is a bit, you need to make the judgment on when this is okay to do or not, but I think it's really important, is I've also got to a point where I've acted like a mirror. So I've said to the leaker, say they've done something in the team dynamic, in the team meeting or in the room. I've seen them do something. I've watched the rest of the team. So let me give you a real example. This was in Australia, actually. So I was out in the middle of nowhere in Australia. I was here from Britain. And, you know, I had no idea about what rural Australia meant. I thought it was like a couple of miles away, right? Anyway, so I was out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of the people who were in this team worked and lived on farms. I think had a way that culturally I just didn't understand. We were doing some team development work. It wasn't going brilliantly. The team wasn't going brilliantly. And there was at least 2 or 3 people in the team whose regulation was really poor and had a really big impact. That I could see that within the first session. And we were on something like day 2 or session 2, and one of them were late. She was late for the session, and we'd already started, and we're at the point where people were pairing up to do something. Anyway, she walked in, and she was kind of, sorry, I'm late. And everything about her body, by the way, was saying she wasn't sorry. Does that make sense? Now that you can see when the body says something different, right? So she walked in. And what she actually did was walk in. I can't really do it very well here because I'm not an actress either, so don't. She walked in, say this was her bag. She kind of walked in, chucked her bag down, sat down, was kind of like sitting like this, you know. And I stopped and said, hang on, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. Yeah, why? What do you want me to do now? And you could see the rest of the group, all of their eye contact just went everywhere other than to me or to her. So what that says to me is you all know what's gone, you've just seen what's happened. It's not like people don't see it, they just don't want to tackle it. So their eyes were going all over the place. I just don't want to look at anybody, definitely not Kate and definitely not her. And I stopped and said, look, so let's call her Louise. So I said, Louise, there's some really important learning here for the team. Did you come in wanting to tell us that you weren't very happy? And so she was like, I am happy, I'm fine. I said, okay, so I just want to check again. You came in thinking that we wouldn't know that you were not that happy. And so she said, I don't know what you mean, I haven't said anything. And I said, you haven't said anything with your mouth, you've said loads with your body. So what I saw happen, and I've talked through what happened, which tells me you're not that happy, something's not quite right. And then she burst into tears and said something had happened on Facebook that morning about something to do with support workers or something, and that this wasn't right and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah. So she's crying, like, yeah, great. Okay, one should stop crying, saying, okay, this is really important for the team and for you. So you came in, and we need to know, did you come in with the intention to let us all know you weren't happy? Because that tells me she knows she's doing it. Does that make sense? Like, she needs to still regulate, but she's aware of it. If she didn't say that, she said, yeah, I did come in, I know I wasn't very happy, and I suppose, yeah, I did want people to know. Well, there's other ways of doing it than that. What do you think's the impact of that on the team? And I said to her, I can tell you the impact. What I saw happen was people looking all over the place. You know, people weren't going to run to rescue you. In fact, they were just avoiding you because it's too scary. Stop, because you're all looking a bit pensive. So I'm just going to stop for a minute. Susan.
Is leaking always bad? You're muted.
Sorry, it depends on its impact. So if its impact is negative to a team, I'm trying to think of a time. Tell me what you think in a time when it's been positive.
I'm just thinking that, like, what is the balance, right? I think that we learn so much from our facial expressions, our body language, our all of these things, and I can see, I guess, many situations. I wish I could think of a specific one where, like a surprise or something somebody has leaked has actually been a really positive signal to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Go on, Carla.
Would you think it'd be around the fact of, like, say, someone who doesn't show much emotion or vulnerability and trying to bring that vulnerability into a team where their leaking probably would be a good aspect in some situations? Because
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a really interesting point, like
Yeah.
like getting an over regulator to, or not getting, like, or yeah, just encouraging some of that. I think the vulnerability is a really good description, Carla.
Nathan?
I've been in a sort of stuff, maybe it wasn't with where I work now. This was a few years ago, where people came in, like you said, lady came in and very obviously wasn't happy, showed all the signs, but when it was questioned, they just wouldn't enter into it at all. And the sales, and she got called on it, say, well, clearly you're not impressed with what's being said. And it's like, well, what's the point in saying something, nothing gets done anyway, and wouldn't move past that point. So what would you try, if they're really set on not opening up about it, how would you go about that?
So I think there's some stages to this, right? So I do want you, so from the session today, I do want you to start talking about regulation and leaking, right? But I want you to get clear about yourself first. So you're able to talk about it in a way that says, you know, I'm leaking when it happens or whatever, right? I think there's a variety of different ways you can think about support and regulation, right? In teams, so I know this is about teams, but I think the example you're giving, Nathan, is kind of colleagues, or if you're managing somebody who's an under-regulator. I think that if you've got to a point with somebody where you can name their leakage and its impact, so the kind of critical bit is helping the person see what it is and its impact, which is where you'll get to with the team. So just starting introducing regulation, getting them to identify what it looks like in themselves. The next phase is what could be the impact of that on other people. So you're right, Susan, for some people, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think if I'm not the best regulator in the world, so I'm probably not the best example. So I can think of, trying to think of somebody who's well regulated. So people could say, you know, when I'm under regulating, I'm saying people because it's not me. When I'm under regulating, I might kind of get a bit distant, or you know, I'll find it difficult to stay connected to you. But we might not actually be able to see that very much. So I don't know if Carla's really engaged. I'm reading your body language, but I don't know. You know, it doesn't look like you're not engaged. But let's just say that is what's happening for Carla. Well, the impact of that is minimal. It's not destroying anything that's going on in the room. But let's say when I can be under-regulating, I can be argumentative and deliberately argumentative. So I don't feel like in the moment, but I can definitely tell you I can be deliberately argumentative. I can kind of be like, no, I don't see it like that. No, I don't agree with that. Or, you know, I can be rolling my eyes a bit. If I'm really behaving badly, I can be looking for allies. So I could look to Susan and kind of making some interesting eye contact, that's saying through me eye contact, she's talking a load of shit. Do you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, you can see it, can't you, in people? So when I'm doing that and you lot could all see it, then that has an impact. So that's the kind of critical bit. Being able to know what it is that you do and being able to see its impact. And that's where I would take the conversation with a team. So identify it for yourself, explore its impact. And, you know, it's interesting because it does link with self-awareness, that people can say, well, and I'm trying to think of a real example. Well, you know, I just say it as it is. Okay, what could be the impact of that, though, for the team? Well, they know where they stand. So these are the kind of classic ones I get. Well, you know, the team know where they stand. Well, I get that, but what could be the impact of that? And if they aren't very aware of the impact of that, then yeah, I'd look to team members to say, what could be the impact of that? On a really bad day, what could be the impact? Well, actually, it makes it hard to disagree with you, you know. And I'll use some of that. If I've been working with a team, I'll say, one of the things I notice is when you do that, people seem to struggle to disagree with you, or people seem to struggle to challenge you. Does that make sense? So you kind of seeing what it is, seeing its impact, and where you want to get to is people are willing to start to work on that. Chris?
Sorry to interrupt, I've got to run. I just want to see if you can tell what happened to you, Kate. You see my score at the top there? I didn't get dinner one night.
Because of your regulation?
No, my social awareness.
Your social awareness. Oh, right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't very happy. But anyways, I've got some work to do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys. I have to run. I'll see you next time.
Okay. See you next time, Chris.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay. Anybody got any of this yet, Carla?
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking lots on this one. Question for you, Kate. So around the regulation and how people may come up with excuses and stuff like that around why they are the way that they are. However, do you think someone's culture, cultural upbringing and cultural background will have a lot to do with the regulation and someone self-regulating?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, when I was saying before about the team that I worked with out in the sticks in Australia, the culture of that area was so alien to me that it definitely it was real stretch to kind of, oh, this is how people talk to each other. So one of the things I've learned, and you might not agree with this, but one of the things I've learned about Australian culture is it's a bit more direct than the UK culture. So the British culture is a little bit more polite, right? So I remember the thing that used to throw me all the time in Australia is Australians say, or some Australians say, you'll be in the middle of a discussion and they'll go, well, look, if it was me, I'd do X, Y, and Z. Well, my experience of that terminology and with that kind of intonation, Luke, is a bad thing. So somebody's about to tell you something like, Luke, if you keep behaving like that, that's what I think it sounds like, right? But in Australia, Luke is almost like a pause, a kind of, well, you know, if I think about it, this is what I think about it. That was really difficult for me, really difficult to learn about. So I completely agree. I think it's got everything to do with your culture, how you're brought up. But again, if it's having a negative impact on the team, people need to know about that. And that's the kind of critical thing. What's the impact of that? And are the team able to handle that and talk about that? Are they able to say, I find it really difficult to do X when you do Y? That's what you're trying to get at. And we don't want people to change. So we definitely don't want people to be robots. You know, we want people to use their emotions to make decisions. We want people to bring their emotions to the room. But it's about the impact of poor regulation and how we can help people think about strategies to modify that or to control it, really, or manage it.
Shanti?
Susan?
No, I was going to say Shanti
Yeah.
was raising her hand.
I was also thinking that, you know, sometimes when you're comfortable within a group, you feel that you can express your vulnerabilities and your, you know, and your anxieties and your frustrations. But I suppose it goes back to what Kate is saying, that, you know, people need to understand where you are at and the reason for why you're expressing those emotions. I think it is healthy, though, to be able to come into a room and, you know, say, look, this is how I'm feeling today. But, you know, as long as the rest of them get it, that, you know, it's not something that you do all the time, or you're not trying to put out your whole lot of, you know, deregulation there for them to deal with. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense to me. I think it might be helpful. So over the next 2 weeks, I think it would be really good for you to just notice how people regulate, right? So notice when you think this is under regulation, this is leaking. Notice when it is somebody's emotions in the room, but notice the impact. If it's not detrimental, that's not a problem. It's when the impact is detrimental to the team functioning. And if it's detrimental to other people, really. And what I've learned is people, until you start talking about this stuff, people don't necessarily know it about themselves. They just think it's who they are. That's the way I am, which is cool. But knowing the impact is also really cool. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Nathan, did you put your hand up there? Go for it. No, go for it.
No, I actually didn't.
Oh, okay.
I thought my watch was going off. That was all I was just looking at that.
Okay, no problem. So, okay, so the regulation is the bit that I'm most interested in terms of emotional intelligence and teams. The rest is important and it's interesting, but it's not the stuff that I think I get most connected to. So self-motivation is, I suppose it's getting at people's ability to drive themselves, people's ability to, achieve something or go at something because it makes sense to them. There's loads of debate about motivation. So I don't know if we did talk about it in the beginning, but Daniel Pink has a brilliant book. And if you haven't read this one, then definitely get this one. It's Daniel Pink, I think it's called Drive. Is that right, Susan? Yeah. And he's done loads of studies on what actually motivates people. And he would argue it's got nothing to do with money or status, that it's to do with like self-mastery, like growth and development. Can't remember what the others are, but anyway, we will be looking at that at some point. But he's talking about this. You're talking about something that's beyond money or status, you know, what it is that drives people. What you'd see in people are these things. I'm not going to go through them because I'm aware of time, but they are people who can take on a challenge. They're just willing to grow. They're willing to drive themselves. You will have had some scores in that. It's really interesting because motivation is the area I always score the lowest in. And I would consider myself to be somebody who's quite highly motivated, but I always score lowest in that one. So social awareness, and this is just a funny cartoon because I think it really epitomizes it. So this is a mum saying to her daughter, you know, so you broke your heart. Well, I can't say I didn't see that coming, you know. And you must have people in your lives who are a bit like that, you know, just don't understand the impact of what it is they're saying. So people who have high levels of social awareness, they're able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, you know, they're able to understand the emotional makeup of people. So, you know, going back to the Belbin, team workers are people who often have quite high levels of emotional literacy, so they can read what's going on in the room. And I think socially aware people are exactly that. They can suss out, she doesn't seem too happy today, or he doesn't seem himself, you know, those kind of people. And there's some of the things that you'd see in people. I'll put all of this up on Slack. And then the last is social skills. So for some of us, you know, again, a funny cartoon, the whole idea of being sent to network, for some people, it's like, I'm absolutely drowning here. You know, I absolutely hate it if social skill is not your thing. And what it means is people who are able to build relationships with people in a way that's they're comfortable, confident, you know, kind of small talk, finding out about people. They can find connections between people who have high levels of social skill. And there's some of the things you see. Okay, so I will put this on the Slack channel. Okay, I've already said that I think self-regulation or emotional regulation is incredible. You know, it has an enormous impact on teams. Somebody who has high levels of self-regulation, you know, tend to be people who are willing to reflect and think about themselves and their impact. They're willing to sit in the grey, you know, we'll kind of see where this takes me. And they have a kind of high level of integrity, I suppose, because what they say and what they do is congruent. That's what we're getting at. Okay, so your emotional intelligence questionnaire. So how are we doing for time? Let me just check.
Not great, Kate.
Right. Okay, great. So where shall we go then, Susan? What would make sense? You know the plan.
I mean, let's just. I'd be really interested in trying to do a little bit of a round robin on a controversial subject, but I also feel like we haven't really got into the conflict yet. So I'll take it back to you, whatever you feel is best use of our last 20 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take it then. I'm going to take it this way and we'll see if this works, right? So you need to know about emotional regulation to even start talking about conflict, okay? What can help teams in terms of exploring conflict? Practicing disagreeing. So really intentionally creating debates. So that's what Susan's saying about creating a debate and getting people to disagree. There is a mechanism to do that, a safe mechanism, which is called a round robin. But the intention is you're intentionally bringing into the room disagreement. So you choose a topic. I've done this with teams loads of different times. Chosen a topic that you know is controversial, and said, you lot, who agrees with that, who disagrees with that, and then we find a way to disagree together. We have a debate about it. Well, I see it like this. And the reason you're doing that is to practice disagreement, okay? The notion of being devil's advocate, appointing a devil's advocate is really helpful in meetings. Whatever we say, we want somebody to critically appraise that. And I think the thing that's really critical is that you as a facilitator are able to demonstrate conflict, and nothing bad happens. So if somebody disagrees with you, it's not like you don't speak to them for the rest of the day. It's that you're able to kind of hear that, take that on board. I don't agree with that, but that's okay. It's interesting to hear it or see it from your perspective. I'm going to mention this because if you are doing work with the teams, I think it's important to do this exercise. So Carla, you touched on it, depending on your experience, your background, your culture, depends on how comfortable you are with conflict. So I think I mentioned this last time, my partner's background is in a kind of strong Catholic family where, being polite, being agreeable was really important. He doesn't like conflict so much that for years I used to say he had curly feet because he sits on the fence so much. So he'd kind of, he'd avoid conflict, he'd just kind of agree with people. I was brought up in a family where, having a few pints of beer and just creating a debate was what we did. We'd talk about anything, we'd disagree about anything. So in terms of where we are on the spectrum, we're very, very different places, which means if you get a sense of that for the team, where are you on this spectrum? Physically get them up, stand where your comfort is, then you're asking the team, what does that mean for how we support everybody to give their perspective? Because if you're down the terrified end, it's much harder for you to disagree with somebody. What support are people going to need to be able to disagree with somebody? So I think that's really important. The round robin is one way to create a debate. That's what you were going to lead on, wasn't it, Susan? Yeah. So I don't think we do have time to do a debate, but what I do want to leave you with around conflict, right? So there are the kind of main message is get the teams understanding and talking about regulation and the impact of that, and then start to introduce disagreement into the teams. So start to introduce safe ways for people to disagree. Ham it up if you need to. Choose topics. What was going to be the topic, Susan, that you were going to choose today?
I was going to talk about mandatory voting.
Okay, because in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So choose a topic. There's nothing to do with our work. It's just a topic that will be controversial and people will disagree. That's the aim of the game, really. And from here on in, I would try to introduce some disagreement at every team meeting session, every session. Once they've learned the language of regulation and they know why it's important to disagree and to kind of work with conflict, that's what I would do. The thing is, before next session, actually, I tell you what, I'm not even going to go there. What I am going to do is I'm going to put into the Slack channel a short video, and it's by a woman called Margaret Heffernan. And she has such an interesting way at looking at conflict, right? It blows your mind, it's brilliant. And I'm going to put that in, and if you could watch it, I don't think it's any longer than 10, 12 minutes. If you could watch it, and I'm going to post some questions after you've watched it. I won't give it away now because it won't make any sense. But if you could watch that, I'm going to ask you questions about what she's talking about. And then I think when we come back next time, that's where we pick up the conflict stuff, because she has a very different way of looking at it and a really helpful way for teams. I wonder if I stop there. I'm sweating because I've been talking so much. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, what's coming up for me is I think that our excitement around creating a bit of tension and conflict, and our fear of that is one of the biggest things we struggle with as leaders. Nathan.
I'm just thinking, I just find like I'm not afraid to sort of question something. If I see it, if I don't 100% agree with it, I will ask a question, but I'm not, some people see it as me trying to stir the pot sort of thing, but I'm not doing it just so that I can stir the pot. I'm trying to get, like what Kate was saying earlier, give me the reasoning behind it. If I can, once I can hear and understand the reason behind it and I can process it myself, then I can start to get on board, even if it is completely opposite to what I originally was going with. But I have had a couple of times people just sort of was questioning it just for the sake of questioning and just to stir the pot, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what in some of the teams that I work in, we try to create a, I guess like part of our culture is to really encourage dissenting voices. Like, I don't agree with that. I think we can do better, but I trust you enough to make that decision. But to create a culture where it's okay to disagree, have a different view, but still trust the other teammate or whoever to have heard that and make a different decision.
Carla?
For me, I don't find it as conflict. I don't find the way that I talk or conflict. I don't look at it as conflict. For me, it's more around a learning aspect for me, and it's like how I learn really, really well. And even through school, I used to debate, not shut up, as the teacher said, but that's because I'd be constantly asking lots and lots of questions or disagreeing with something, but that was the only way I was able to learn. So for me, it's not actually conflict, it's my form of learning.
I think I agree a lot with what Carla is saying, because if you're talking about self-awareness, it is important to look at the difficult things and things that we don't agree with. And I always encourage different viewpoints, because I think it makes me a lot better and more open-minded to look at stuff, not only from the way that I perceive things. So conflict is good.
What about you, Kat? We haven't heard much from you today.
Yeah, so just thinking about this with my team are certainly not afraid of conflict. We have loads of it, but they don't debate healthily, and a lot of it turns into personal attacks. So yeah, I think this will be really good for my team, and half of my team have had training in the past with Kate around the leaking and regulation. So yeah, be a very good refresher for them. So when we had that training with you, Kate, probably over 12 months ago, the team was going really good, probably 3 to 6 months with all of the language and whatnot, but that's all dropped off now. So for me as well, it's recognising that this needs to be an ongoing thing.
And I think that's such a helpful perspective in the room, Kat, because honestly, I could say it till I'm blue in the face, right? You can do a team development program over 6 sessions and help a team get established, but you have to work with intention long term. Because you're talking the dynamic of a team, depending on who's in it. Sometimes you can get teams set up and that's great, they'll run themselves. Sometimes you can get teams set up and actually stuff like, I'm struggling to regulate. I do remember some of your team members, and it's a challenge for some people to regulate. It's a challenge to kind of keep hold of their emotions when they're going crazy, or and working with intention long term, I think, is the aim of the game here. Like, I really do. For some teams, not every team, but for some, I think, checking back in with each other. The other thing I just wanted to put in, right, I wouldn't do this work on day one with a team. I wouldn't go anywhere near it. I have to start, and you don't have to follow this process. You can follow whatever process you like. But I suppose I would not get straight into, and I've seen people do it. Actually, I was thinking about this, Susan, when I was preparing for this session, our session with Kaz, our time with Kaz. One of my levels of discomfort is, I think if you go into this too quickly, when the group haven't got psychological safety, I think it can do a lot of damage. So I would really stress, so don't be frightened of it, because all you're doing is asking them, not you, them to think about their regulation, asking them to think about what that looks like, asking them to think about what the impact of that might be. And then you get into a point where you support the team to explore, how do we work with this? How do we help you think about that impact? But what I have learned is you and the team need to have a level of trust before you get to this, because if you introduce it too quickly, I think it can do a bit of damage. I think it just makes people frightened.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sometimes just as simple as getting to know each other first. It's like when you spend time with somebody and get to know them, you start to be able to, have a sense of, or do they, have good intentions? Are they all of these things that and Kate, the example that you give is a really one, like almost from day one, the first time we came together as a team, it was like got right into the hardcore stuff. And I think that most of us, certainly me, and it sounds like Kate as well, felt like I'd been blown back into the wall. It's like, where is this coming from? I don't even know this guy, and he's like at my throat. It wasn't pleasant, and I don't think that our relationship would have been better, and certainly not as challenging at the beginning if that would have been different. But I'm just noticing the time, so we've got 7 minutes before we end. Kate, maybe do you want to just reiterate the homework and then lead us in a checkout?
So the kind of critical things, and I'll put this all in Slack, the critical things is I want you to get clear on your regulation. So what it looks like when it's poor, what might be some of the kind of precursors to that. So apologies, Nathan, but I know you're an adult. Things like our hormones and all of that kind of stuff, women's hormones can have a really big impact on your ability to regulate. So notice that, coffee has a really big impact, caffeine, lack of sleep, all of that stuff. So I want you to just almost I don't want you to journal if you want to, but I'm not going to check it. I just want you to have a heightened awareness about your regulation. Notice your impact in teams and just take the time to spot where you see others maybe not regulating well, right? That's the kind of, the second one is watching the Margaret Heffernan film, which I'll post into Slack. It's brilliant. So I urge you to watch it. It'll have a big impact on your team development work. And then if you're working with teams, the session this week, or in the next couple of weeks, I'd suggest, is that you get out the emotional intelligence assessment that you've all done, or that some of you have done, and you start to talk about emotional intelligence and just introduce regulation. So leak in regulation, but keep it really light. Keep it funny. What will your partners see? All of that stuff. And I'll put all of that in the Slack channel. So if you've got a session with teams, that's where I'd go with it next.
Sorry,
Okay.
Kate, just one very quickly. That emotional intelligence test, is that on the Slack channel?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was last week, Nathan. Sorry, it's a test that I asked you to fill in and then ask a partner to fill in.
Okay, cool.
Partner first, then you, wasn't it? Yeah, or somebody who loves and cares about them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan?
Sorry, what was the question? I was looking for something else. I was actually looking to put some... Sorry.
No. So I've reiterated what it is we're doing between the next 2 weeks. I'll post that in the Slack channel. And then did you pose a question for check-in? Did you?
Check out? No, not yet. I was just looking. I was trying to find something that was also around self-regulation, about the study that was done with judges in Israel about when you're most likely to get for them to be lenient or really hard. So if you get your case heard first thing in the morning, just after they've had a good breakfast, your chance of a lenient sentence is about at double that of right before lunch, when their blood sugars are low and they need a break. And it's certainly at the end of the day. So this is another element, make sure you're eating well, and that you notice, like, for me, my mom always used to say that you don't want to be around Susan after 4 in the afternoon because she just turns into a horrible little girl. But now I know that it was just because my blood sugar was dipping and, my self-regulation then was really impacted. So
it's funny, I was working with a team this week, and one of the things they said about their manager was he's been doing fasting, this 5-2 thing. And they were saying that on a Wednesday, they've all learned to avoid him. This, his regulation's poor. So you're absolutely right. There's kind of real conditions, aren't there? The kind of physical conditions that have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of a clever checkout. Would anybody like to offer one? Shanti, thank you.
I'm going to offer my favorite. Be the change you want to see.
Nice. Anybody else got a favorite? I'll share actually this. Anybody heard of the 4 agreements? I was in a co-working space earlier this week, and let's see if I can you see this? So you can't see this. So the 4 agreements: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Anybody else have words of wisdom for us? Nathan.
Not to take yourself too seriously, I think, because once you start doing that, I feel like then everything's going to seem too hard if you can't have a laugh at yourself at the end of the day.
For sure. Carla.
So mine, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, probably because I'm heading back to New Zealand. So mine's a favourite proverb in the Māori language. So it's he mea nui o te au, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. So that's what's the most important thing in the world. It's people, it's people, it's people.
I'll go next. Mine would be, it's a saying, I think it's John O'Brien who talks about it, where he says, don't let better be the enemy of best. So that kind of resonates for me when we're in a situation where it's kind of what we're proposing is better than what it is today for people, but it's not best. So that those words definitely resonate for me.
What about you, Kat?
I don't really have one. Maybe tomorrow is another day.
Love it. Fantastic. Can't wait to see you all in 2 weeks. Check the Slacks. Keep the conversation going there. Watch the videos. Do your homework. Last word to you, Miss Fulton.
Oh, no, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for listening. I will endeavour to try to balance the time again next time. But I'll post all the stuff in there, and I'm really excited for you watching Margaret Heffernan. You'll love it.
Great. And I'll do the video now. And Carla, especially you, if there is still a problem, maybe let me know sooner rather than later. I don't know if there's anything I'll be able to do, but that was a good noticing. So thanks. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, see you later, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
See you.